Welcome back to another episode of the All Takes No Whiffs podcast. We have another great episode this week, and we have a special guest with us this week. We have Quinn Redmond, and he is here kind of to tell us about kind of his life a little bit and kind of just a little inspiration is on the way. So, Quinn, and we're glad to have you on.
Thank you. I'm super happy to be here. As someone who's relatively dabbled in podcasts for the last I don't even know how many years until now I've actually started to do them. I'm always super happy to go on anyone else's podcast, especially that you guys have been doing it now for a handful of weeks, and you guys have experience in it. So I'm still a rookie in the game, and I'll take any experience on a podcast. I love going on and talking sports.
Oh yeah, we're really excited to have you on, and I'm really excited to get into sports. A couple former athletes over here. You yourself being an athlete, this is about to be a solid conversation. I can feel it.
Oh, I can't wait. Let's go.
Quinn Redmond. So I know you have an extensive history as an athlete. Before the athletic history, do you want to tell us anything about your background and how you got into a couple of the sports that you did?
So I guess essentially, I mean, I grew up around family that was all in athletics. I mean, really, sports for me, it's not necessarily like I picked them. I feel like sports relatively picked me. So my mom is the middle of seven, and she's got three brothers and three sisters. All three of her brothers wrestled in college, two of which were at the University of Illinois. She played sports herself in college. She did volleyball and softball, I want to say, in college, but she was a gymnast up until college. My dad was a gymnast at the University of Illinois. My sister was playing sports, and she's 4 years older than me. So by the time I was a kid, she was already playing sports. My aunt Susie played softball in college. My other aunt I think she had cheered in college and played some softball. So really, realistically, I mean, like I grew up around sports. Grandparents were in sports. Parents were in sports. Sibling in sports. So really for me, it's like, hey, sports, like go for it.
Yeah. No, I feel that. Just being surrounded by it all your life, basically. That's definitely me with baseball. Being half Dominican, Dominicans live and breathe baseball. So I was brought up in that, enjoyed it for a good portion of my life. But I just wanted to know, I guess, was there a specific family member that had you, I guess, become passionate for a specific sport? And what did that family member do for you to, I guess, open that sport up for you?
I mean, I could probably say my the two uncles that wrestled at the University of Illinois. I kind of definitely started to get more into wrestling, and I guess wrestling on my mom's side of the family was something that, because they had wrestled, at basically the highest level, at a big D1 school, and that was kind of something that was like really really cool. I felt like I've always kind of had wrestling like as my main, and like that was like my base of like fundamentals and such. But it kind of just jumps around. I mean, being a gymnast was kind of fun, and especially doing that early as a kid. Like I think that was purely because of my parents. I don't know if I can exactly pinpoint like one person as like, hey, this is the reason why I started doing a bunch of stuff. I mean, I know at the end of the day, like my mom supported me in all these different sports, and she was the one that was mostly driving me to practice and whatnot. Um, so I think really, if anything, it's like I think my mom forced me probably to play more sports because I said, hey, I want to do this, and she's like, okay, and I was like, oh, like I want to do this, and she's like, okay, and I think really at the end of the day, it's like she was more willing to go along with me just saying like, hey, I just want to go play a bunch of sports. And realistically, I think it kept me out of more trouble than anything.
I feel that sports keeping us out of the house as kids, and that was something. My mom, we had a big family, so us partaking in sports, gave them a little breather. That's one aspect, and I definitely feel that about them sports keeping us out of trouble. That was a big aspect because where I grew up, things could definitely get a little, sketchy. So being in sports definitely got me out of that, or not got me, but being in sports definitely kept me out of that. So I'm grateful to baseball for that. But uh, since we are a couple of former baseball players, do you want to talk about your baseball history at all? I know you mentioned that you
Yeah.
dabbled in that.
I know me with baseball. Really the only reason I kind of stopped playing baseball kind of got to the point where I started playing golf more often. And so golf and baseball were really kind of starting to have like this mesh and like carryover. And I basically was finally driven to the point when once I got to, I think it was like 8th grade, where I was then forced to be like, okay, you're not going to keep doing the whole baseball swing versus golf swing. Like you have to choose. And for me, like I always enjoyed playing baseball. I pretty much played up the middle when I was a kid. I mean, I literally played at one point. I have played every position, but I primarily played when I was a like early kid. I played like third base. But then pretty much from that point forward, I was either pitching, playing center, I was playing short, or I was catching. And I always really enjoyed pitching. I felt like early on as a kid, like I threw pretty hard, especially compared to other kids, especially on my team. And I feel like I definitely could have done something with baseball. Just kind of growing up, and I loved throwing and, playing football. I played quarterback a little bit. And so, I mean, I had a pretty decent arm, and pitching was always a lot of fun. And I was a decent hitter, and I kind of got to the point where when I wasn't pitching, I was like really, really bored. And I think that's kind of actually what led me to not be playing baseball as much. Is maybe it was like a little bit of like ADHD or something when I was out there. Cause, standing out in center field as a kid, having any person throw decent, it's like you're standing out there, you're looking up at, you're chasing butterflies, counting the blades of grass. Like there was a lot of times playing infield. Like I used to literally like make little like sand mounds with my feet. And like my parents
I'm
used
there
to
with
get on
you.
me all the time. They're like, stop. They're like, stop. I'm like, I'm bored. Like I'm literally out here just like, yes, I'm paying attention. But like I was just like the kid that's just like constantly moving because I'm like, can something happen, please? But yeah, I guess it was about 8th grade that it finally made that stop. But I mean, I was definitely at the point where I definitely thought that like it was going to be like baseball, football for me.
No, that's really interesting. I know Christian likes the pitching aspect. Christian was a pitcher himself. I kind of like the golf stuff you were talking about. You want to get a little more into that? I'm a big into golf, to be honest. I play a lot now, and
Yeah. I mean, honestly, me with golf, it was something that was kind of one of those back burner type things. My dad had played. He didn't really kind of get into playing until his like young adult life. Being super dedicated to gymnastics and whatnot, like that was his life. So it was something after college, after he got into the corporate world, is when he picked up golf. But really, for me, in the time that I initially kind of started the wave of golf and like started going to the driving range with my dad and stuff, I mean, it's pretty easy. Tiger was playing some of the best golf, anyone has ever seen. And he was really, really hot right when I started kind of getting interested, because I can still remember that '05 Masters. I was literally with my dad. It was like Applebee's or Chili's. It was one of the two. And I remember that chip from the back of the green and, seeing the Nike logo, wait, and then in, and like
then it fell
pretty much
in.
pretty much from that point forward, I was just like, it changed golf for me. So from that point, it was, I was going to the driving range with my dad all the time. And then once I got to this, I was, a little bit older, then I was like, okay, let's try to start get you in a few tournaments. And then once I was in some tournaments, I was like, okay, this is a lot of fun. And I really like doing this. And really for me, the thing with golf of what I ended up actually ultimately, I chose golf out of all my other sports in high school. So I initially stopped everything else but golf. I had stopped wrestling in high school. So I basically got all the way down to I wrestled and golfed in high school. And I wrestled and made it to state my freshman year. And as soon as I made it to state, I didn't really want to wrestle the next year until state. And that just kind of drove me more and more away from the sport. But after that freshman spring semester of golf, I started seeing this like really good wave that I was starting to get better. And then that entire summer, all I did was play golf. And I got a new set of clubs, and that new set of clubs completely changed my game, because I went from like old hand-me-downs that I was using from my dad to stuff that was like tailor-made, literally tailor-made. And plus they were made for me. So it drastically improved my game. I mean, I went from a kid that, played low 90s, mid 80s golf to I was a, mid 70s player the minute I got new clubs. I mean, I've always been athletic. So for me, generating power, I always had a pretty pretty good swing just based off of baseball and other natural athletic abilities. And, I kind of got the technology to match up at the same time with what seemed like I really was going to basically just play golf, and I was just going to turn and fully pour it on. And I stuck with golf from the spring of my sophomore year, played the rest of, junior, senior year in high school as just just that one sport. Made it to Lewis University, where I was on a golf scholarship my freshman year. Was a 9-man on the bag for the team, and really kind of started to see the different side of the sport of like, oh, so this is what it's like when you're not in the starting lineup. This is what it's like when, you kind of have a little mistakes and when the competition level rises. And essentially, I just kind of didn't give golf the needed love that it needed at that time. I wanted to do other things. I was too busy playing intramurals. I was falling right back into, hey, I want to play every single sport rather than just like, dude, just go play golf. Like literally you can go to the range every day. Like we have free range balls. You can go play golf whenever you want. And instead of going and getting better at golf, like I went and tried doing more and more sports, which then led to me, leaving the university and completely changing my entire path. And at this point now, like I'm still I'm a better golfer than I was in college because like mentally I changed. But for me, I've shifted to be like, well, I can play mini tours and maybe play on a smaller tour or whatnot, just because I kind of got to that level. But for me, I don't really know if I want to do that. This last summer, so being here in Fargo, it's tough because it's -5 degrees outside right now. But at the end of the summer, I essentially kind of got to the degree of seeing a lot more of the long drive stuff. And I got to honestly give a lot of credit to Bryson DeChambeau, because he brought a lot of it kind of to the forefront. And I think him and Kyle Berkshire have kind of changed that nature of long drive. And that's something that I'm getting more and more into because just my natural swing, I have a very, very fast club head speed. I've got an explosive ball speed to the degree of my club head average and ball speed average and carry distance. If I played on the PGA Tour right now, and I know no one cares about, driving distance or anything, but I would be the number one player on the PGA Tour right now if we looked at only at driving the golf ball. So in terms of like hitting a driver well and having a pure swing, that's about the only phase of golf that I have on lock. Outside of driving the golf ball, I'm a pretty good iron player. I've got, pretty good ball striking just, from the same with my driver swing, but there's a couple that, get a little errant there. My short game isn't as crisp. My putting's okay, but it's really not that great, especially comparatively to the other really good players. I mean, I grew up playing with some really good guys. I grew up playing with some pros and guys who were on the senior tour and whatnot. And at the end of the day, I competed because I was an explosive golfer that could essentially overpower every golf course. But as the game has now changed and, they're able to build onto certain courses and essentially level out the playing field again, yeah, I'm kind of getting caught back into the wash. But in terms of a long drive competition, I think that's really for me where my golf career is actually headed. Unless, I suddenly get tremendous at short game, I'm pretty much going to see myself out on long drive stuff here in the next 3 years.
Well, that's cool. Those long drive competitions are really honestly cool to see because those guys, I mean, they drive that ball freaking mile, to be honest. I mean, I haven't seen anything like it before. And you're right, Bryson DeChambeau, he definitely is the one, like the pioneer of all this.
Yeah, him and Kyle's been around now for some years, but what Kyle started to do, I mean, he's started to kind of set himself apart from the rest of the long drive guys. And so I think that's the kind of big difference for him is because like Kyle's still wanting to play like on tour. So for him, like he's still like trying to make it as good as possible to be like, hey, how do I get really good at driving the ball, but not just putting it in the grid? Like, how do I get good at driving the golf ball and putting it in fairways? And like, that's what I think has set him apart from everybody else. Because I think there's a lot of guys out there that are literally just bodybuilders that just got decently good at swinging the golf club. They're ex-athletes in some regard, but they didn't really play golf. And now they can hit a golf ball far. But that's the difference for him and Bryson. And I think the reason why they win more often is because they just have a better golf swing and they're a lot more accurate. And so I'm hoping like that's what I can bring in. Cause I watch a lot of Kyle Berkshire stuff. And where he kind of started, I was kind of looking at some of his numbers from, like 3 to 5 years ago. And I'm pretty close to where he was kind of at that point. So I'm like, okay, if I just kind of follow what he did, I think I can, be a very competitive player in that space. So we'll have to see once we get into the spring and, how things kind of transpire, both, like I said, still got some football stuff, still got some MMA stuff, but that's definitely, I think, the realm that I'm headed toward, just because, like you said, more people are starting to watch it. More people are starting to see it. And especially with the, the World Long Drive Championship, it's been held at the WinStar Casino for the last like 5 years or whatnot. And growing up in Frisco, I mean, that's literally 45 minutes north of where I'm from. So.
Oh, that's dope. When it comes to golf, I'm not too well versed. Alex could attest to that. Last time we went to Top Golf together,
Oh.
I'm
Yeah,
not
so
proud of it.
you were recovering still from your knee surgery.
I guess I could use that excuse, but yeah, no, I'm not too familiar with golf. But something I am really familiar with that you did just mention is the fight game, and we talked about it a little before. I know you've got an extensive track record with wrestling. Told me that you were about to get into MMA. I want to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think honestly, for me, in terms of like why I ever wanted to do it, growing up and being a wrestler and kind of being in that realm of like when UFC kind of started to get popular. So like I can remember back to like the Chuck Liddell and like Tito Ortiz, like that UFC type of days. And I think that's kind of what initially got me hooked. And now as it's starting to kind of get bigger and it's starting to do a lot more of like Patty the Batty, like I think, like especially as someone who initially when I first kind of got into it, and knowing weight cutting and whatnot and how much he cuts and what goes on, but like studying like my wrestling skills and like, okay, I can do what this person does if I get good at striking. Well, I'm a better wrestler than this person. So if I can figure out this aspect of the game, like I think I can beat that person. So like I'm looking at this as like, okay, like I'm looking at guys in the UFC, like, okay, I'm a better wrestler than this person, but he's got me in this edge. So maybe I can stand up with this person if I can maybe be on their feet, or maybe I can, be on the ground with this person. But really for me, like it just kind of goes back to being a kid and just remembering old UFC days. And no one ever really told me, hey, you should be an MMA fighter. Hey, you should do this. And really because I know that we talked about it beforehand of like the first time I sparred, like that for me was something of a big hurdle that I never wanted to get over. Now that I'm kind of over that hurdle, a lot of that negative that the UFC has for me is now out the window. Like that was such a big element of like, hey, am I going to get like one punch? And like, am I going to be knocked out? Like, am I going to get kicked in the head? And like, am I going to be done? So seeing now and like knowing, oh, like it's actually not as bad. Like I felt a lot worse after football games than I do after MMA practice. And like, there's just the element of, oh, I can actually do this. But it was always something that like I wanted to do versus, people being like, oh, like you should do this, or like you should do this. Cause like I know I had people, oh, people tell me with golf, like, oh, you can do this, or like with football, oh, you can do this. And even the same with wrestling. It's just like when it comes to MMA, like at the end of the day, I'm the only person that's ever told myself like, hey, I'm going to do MMA. My mom didn't say it. My dad didn't say it. My sister didn't say it. None of my family members. Essentially any person I'm like, hey, I'm going to do MMA. They're like, you're crazy. I'm like, awesome. I love it. Like that clearly has to mean that I'm doing the right thing. And I think that for me, like, hey, no one told me, to do UFC. And I think like knowing that like I'm the reason that I'm doing it, I think helps me drive a little bit more. But it's just back to being a kid and seeing Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz and Rampage Jackson and, and I listen to a lot of Joe Rogan because it's like I grew up listening to Joe Rogan, and he was in the corner with UFC stuff, and it's just I find it natural as a wrestler. I mean, weight cutting, I don't like it, but it's not something that's really that crazy for me. Like I've done it my entire life. Now knowing I can take a punch, knowing how athletic I can be, and kind of can combine a couple different styles, I think honestly, out of all sports, I think MMA might have a real chance to be my best one. Um, I just have to get the training right. And I think
Mhm.
that's the one for me is I'm definitely looking forward to is if it is in my head as cool as as I can make it be, I definitely think that MMA can end up being my best sport. And knowing that I've done 4 at the college level or higher, like I think that's a pretty big ask in my eyes, but I think it's going to be an even bigger achievement.
Yeah, your point about you being the only one, I guess, telling yourself that you want to get into this. Yeah, it's not often that somebody pushes or encourages somebody to get into the fight game. There's a whole lot of risk, and I just find it dope that you've already got the basis for wrestling, and because a whole lot of top tier wrestlers have been in the UFC. So that's one aspect that you've already got down for the most part, and it's dope to see like how you would approach, I guess, the rest of it, like when it comes to striking. I know you mentioned to me earlier that Muay Thai that might be along the lines of how you want to go about striking, and then yeah, just like the whole aspect. I really do enjoy MMA. I know I mostly center around boxing, but with MMA, it's just dope about how like all the different angles you could take towards a fight. And no, it's dope to hear that you're going to be pursuing that. Do you have a favorite fighter off the top of the head?
I mean, I was always a big GSP fan. I mean,
Oh,
I can remember the fight where he jabbed Koscheck to death, and
Mhm.
his eyes were so swollen. And I mean, he never knocked him down, never really did much. I mean, he just literally hit him with a jab all day long, and jabs and straights. And like I can remember that fight, and it's like, okay, like I feel like I can do that. Um, I enjoyed like early younger John Jones because like now that he's more of a savant and he's a lot more. Um, I'm not going to say in bed with the judges, but the fact that he knows how they score and he knows kind
mhm.
of the system that the MMA has, like I think to some degree, um, that's not really a full point, but I think John has kind of gotten to the point where he's an argument to be made of greatest to ever do it. GSP is an argument to made to best to ever do it. Could be for the same realm. They all did it in a different fashion. Um, Khabib being the only one that went out fully on top, never really ever showed signs of weakness versus like I said, the later time of John now is like he's not as explosive in fights. He's not really going to finish
Mhm.
certain things. Like there are certain ones where he's like going in, hey, if this makes it 5 rounds, I've got the decision in my back pocket because I know I'm going to control the octagon. I'm going to slightly have the edge in striking. Like I'm just going to be more efficient. And I think
Dominic
that's some
Reyes.
exactly. And so I think that for me has kind of been like, eh, like I'm not as big of a John Jones fan just because of the recent years, but like seeing GSP just be an absolute animal and using kind of like he's not a wrestler. Like he was actually not a wrestler, but like people talk about him like being that good of a wrestler. So I think I've got a chance to kind of try to mock some of that style and be able to use wrestling in certain angles and some certain things that I can get to. Because the big thing for him is he was able to use his wrestling in the middle of the octagon versus Khabib and Islam. They do all of their stuff wrestling on the cage.
Mhm.
And so I feel I can have success in the middle of the octagon like GSP did. And I think that could lead to a pretty cool career having, some top tier wrestling and being able to control the octagon from not just, being a good wrestler on the fence, but, out in the open as well.
Yeah, GSP, definitely all time great. And I like how you mentioned basically the three definitive goats of the UFC. I think you could go with either Khabib, GSP, or John Jones. Not really a wrong answer. Your point about John Jones with the slight fall off, I definitely agree with that. Like he was way more like that killer mentality earlier on, and it was definitely noticeable in his last outing. And when it comes to John Jones, the recent news about him matching up for the heavyweight title against how do you pronounce it? Cyril Gane, I'm pretty sure.
Mhm.
How do you feel about that matchup? Because I that's interesting to me.
I think the fact that it was supposed to be with Francis and Ngannou and that whole debacle that, they had their falling out, and you hate seeing a champion leave the sport, and
Yeah.
especially to leave an organization. And, he's now probably going to be doing some boxing stuff with Tyson Fury. And if that ever happens, but then I think to some degree there might be a chance that he actually has a chance to possibly fight Wilder as well. And I think that could actually be a more explosive matchup. And really for him, I think boxing actually works out better for Francis because I think John is a more all-around fighter. And I think that's now the difference that we're going to see of him at heavyweight. If he has any of the same ability to kind of pick where the fight's going to be going on, whether it's on the ground or if they're standing up, now the size gets balanced out. Because the one thing for him when he was fighting at 205 was he was a really big 205.
Yeah.
And now, like, he's been getting and bulked up the right way, lifting heavy and just hitting the weight room really hard. But if he has the conditioning that he had at 205, he might really be unstoppable at heavyweight, because he's either going to push guys really, really hard for 2 rounds and not really try to strike with him that much and just knock dudes out in the third, or if he has the same power or more power now because of actually being stronger and being more built, and he actually looks better, there's a chance that he may have made himself a better athlete. And the only person that really kind of could have taken it was Francis. I think that was the absolute fight that we really wanted to see. I think this fight coming up, it's not really as good of a fight. It's a good conversation, but out of anything, it's, hey, Jones hasn't fought in a couple years. This is going to be a good entrance back into the octagon. There really should be no reason that he loses this fight. But at the end of the day, it's, what are we going to see? You took a lot of time off. We haven't seen you in the octagon. Are you older? Are you fresher? Are you more skilled? Are you less skilled? Do you have the same conditioning? Is it better conditioning? Like, I think at the end of the day, like, we're just so up in the air about what he's going to be. But I think it's more his fight to lose. And it goes on the fact of, okay, like, who's going to really try to take his title? I mean, could you say that some older big name heavyweight? I mean, that's the problem. Like, Francis was the division. People were going to have to go through him. And so like, no one was of that level. The only person was John Jones. Now that he's not there, there's no one that can kind of compete at his level. And so I think it's going to be the same thing that just happened with Francis. It's just like, well, no one was really fighting him, and any people he was fighting, he was just knocking out, no problem. So are we going to see the same with John? I probably think so. So I don't think this fight's going to be as entertaining. I think it's more like the hype machine that the UFC is kind of now trying to figure out and make it a big deal. But if he brings any of that cardio from 205 up, it's going to be disgusting.
Yeah, I get it. And I agree with you, but I feel like I got to emphasize this. Don't sleep on Gane. He's like that. I feel like he mainly lost to Francis because Francis surprised him with the fact that he was going with the wrestling route, because we know Francis, he's a striker through and through. Nobody was expecting that. I think that even caught Gane off guard, but Gane, he's a very capable fighter. I think he's versatile. He's got solid wrestling, but I think his striking is very unique in that he's efficient and creative. So don't sleep on him, but at the same time, I agree. I definitely favor John Jones. We just know what he's capable of, and if he can bring it up to heavyweight, that's a problem.
Yeah, I look at the fight as like 75-25. Like, I think that's kind of like the level. It's like, yeah, he's got a solid 25% chance to win, but it's like, yeah, but John, he's got 75%. Yeah. Like, anything can happen. I mean, that's the nature of fights. We saw with Leon Edwards. I mean, dude was losing four rounds, and the same as Alex Pereira, like losing 3 of 4 rounds and getting that knockout in the 5th. So at the end of the day, any person's got a puncher's chance. But as a semi betting man, yeah, I'm betting on Jones.
Feel it. So we got into, I guess, the scope of what kind of sports you've been in and your upbringing in these sports. Just wanted to ask, what do sports mean to you? I know they take up a good chunk of your life, so you could say it's my life. But outside of that, like, what are some things that you feel sports has taught you, I guess, to apply to the real world, and what are you thankful for with sports?
I actually love that question. Because you kind of touched on it. Sports are my life. At this point, it's really the only thing that I do. Yes, there are 5 jerseys on the wall behind me since I've lived in Fargo for 2 years and 2 months, and so all 5 of these jerseys are from the time that I've been here in Fargo. Um, like football for me right now, like is incredible. I've loved every aspect of football that I've played. There's a team bonding element. There's a brothership element. There's a hard work element. There's a determination. There's success. There's failure. There's pain. There's humble. There's every little thing that you look at that happens in life happens at 10 times the rate in sports. I mean, we can look to this weekend with, what happened in the Chiefs-Bengals game. I mean, that last play with, that people are just absolutely banging on the linebacker for, he hit Mahomes out of bounds. With the exception of that play, he played an incredible game. He actually is the reason the Bengals were even in the game throughout the majority of it because of how well he played. He made one mistake and people throw all of the reasons of why they lost on him. So I think like that can be an element of is understanding failure, understanding, hey, I need to get back up and work harder, understanding, searching and chasing after dreams, understanding that sometimes everything can go your way and you might just not get it, understanding that everything could go your way and you do have this great success. There's injuries, there's playing hurt, there's, the always ever looming of when am I done playing? And I think that one for me is like a little bit of a scary element that I'm
Mm,
still trying to work on. Because I know I'm going to try to play sports as long as I can. I mean, for me, it's not just a way to pass time. It's not just, giving me something to do. I mean, it genuinely is all that I pour my life into. With 14 years active wrestling, 20 years in the sport, but in 24 years or 24 and a half years on this earth, I've played a sport in essentially at least every year for the last 20 years. So for me, all I can really look at is playing sports. I mean, yes, I've worked, but like at the end of the day, like half of my stuff was I was working as a part of some type of sports thing. Like I was a cart guy for a long time because I got free golf. So now with what I'm doing in like my everyday, it's like, yes, I have, a podcast and live show where I'm breaking down sports topics with a buddy of mine, and we're doing a sports talk show. And so it's okay. I'm now basically a sports broadcaster. I've done sports play by play. This name that's on my shirt, Born to Win, that's a company that I started where it is essentially a sports brand. It's a clothing brand for athletes. It's a media outlet that media for athletes by athletes. There's an agency that's coming involved that's going to be, around starting kids at an early age and getting them the education that they need, and not just the education as like a book education. It's more the street education and the money, financial education, and then the other sports knowledge education that you get as being a pro athlete. Then there's a training aspect and, doing all the training stuff for sports and being involved in sports. We're going to be starting some sports leagues. So really for me, like, I don't know what I would do without sports because everything that I've learned has come as a result from sports. All of essentially any lesson that I've really learned and had internalized came as a result of sports. I had to I've lost matches, I've lost games, I've won games, I've won matches. There's injuries that I've had, there's been setbacks, there's been different randomness that have happened. There's been blown calls, there's been weird weather, there's been just crazy situations, and it brings people together. There's been incredible friendships that I've gotten from it. So really for me, without sports, I don't know really what I would be doing. There's a love that I have for sports that it goes beyond just kind of the notion of, oh yes, I'm a part of it, but it's then that further of, I know what it means to my family. I know what it means to the fans. I know what it means to, my brothers that are out there on the field with me. I know what it means to my competitors that are my enemies across from me. There's a respect factor. There's a humbleness factor. Like, there's so many different things that I can attribute to sports, but every single one of them is so intertwined deeply with my entirety of what I'm doing that if you took sports away, I genuinely don't know what I would be doing. Now, yes, I would figure it out. Like, that's fine. But me in sports, that's genuinely all I have. I mean, it's like, I love it. Like, I wake up, I'm trying to, like, I wake up at 5:30, I go work out. Like that, I get my day started off training, and I love it. And if I could train all day, I would train all day. I would play sports all day. I would, go play games. I would be in competitions. And it changed essentially like my makeup. Like, my chemical makeup has now become just like a full-on athlete and someone who is dedicated to sports. I mean, every little element that I'm doing, I can compare to sports, every single thing. And so it goes past love. It's a little bit now to the point where it's obsession. And I just don't know what I would do without it.
No, I mean, that's awesome, honestly. I mean, that's honestly a great organization you're starting to. I mean, that's for the next generation. And it kind of sounds like, I mean, you're always going to be involved in sports, and with your organization that I mean, you kind of have the next step after sports if that whenever that happens.
Yeah, that's definitely the plan. It's little by little, and so those 5 total elements, being clothing, media, agency, training, and then leagues. So
Mhm.
all 5 of those, like, those are like our 5 core things. And there might be more stuff outside of that. It might not even end up being all 5, but to some degree, we've got 2.5 up and running. We've got the clothing that's out. The media is now up and running. And then our training it's in the works. It's not fully done yet, but it's one of those where it's like, well, I can't wait to train like you said, the next generation. It's like, well, I can't wait to train those kids and, give
Mhm.
them all the information that I know and have now combined with. It's like, well, I'm, using a little bit of my football aspect with wrestling, or I'm using a little bit of wrestling and football, or I'm using a baseball piece in this. And so, like, that's my little kind of fun tweak, is like, because I played so many sports, I think I use more of other sports in the sports that they're not actually in. Like with
Mhm.
volleyball, like, I use volleyball and I love volleyball, but like, I purely play volleyball as like a jump training thing for me. Like, it teaches you how to jump. It teaches you how to coordinate and jump awkwardly. It teaches you how to, get your hands involved in the right place and have a little bit different of a hand-eye coordination. So as a receiver, jumping off a awkward angle and trying to get your hand to a right spot to get it on the ball. It's like, it's the same as volleyball or, track or soccer. It's just like they all end up intertwined. And I think that's more the fun way that I'd like to look forward to it. But it's something. It's something for sure.
I was just wondering, when it comes to the training aspect, are you guys going to be covering like multiple sports, or is it just going to be more so like an athletic training for their respective sports?
I'm wanting to do it as just an overall athlete training, just because I played enough sports to where it's like, hey, like, I want to try to teach based off the sports that I played, and so I can at least speak on like 10 different sports. But really, for the most part, like, it's going to be a lot more focused to where it's going to be primarily like wrestling, football, and then probably golf and maybe one other. Because I know wrestling, football, and golf are like my main 3, and like, I've got very deep, immense knowledge. I mean, I've got over 10 years experience in each. And so people always say it takes roughly 10,000 hours to become a master at anything. And I'm like, okay, well, how's 10 years for you? Like, I think that can equate in some decisions. So with those 3, that's kind of my main focus. And, from there, can expand out to baseball and some other stuff. But I think really for me, my main core is I've always been big on fundamentals. It's you have to have a good base, you have to have balance, you have to have a little bit of coordination, and if you have, a good normal stance that focuses on balance and understanding how to bend correctly and jump correctly and run correctly, you can pretty much play any sport.
Hmm. Okay, I got you. Yeah, that's definitely something that would be huge for future generations because me as a kid, all I cared about was playing the sport itself. The fundamentals, yeah, coaches would try to drill that in, but you just do what is really like comfortable to you. But yeah, focusing on the fundamentals, I definitely I respect that a lot because that's just furthering the development for these kids at an earlier point. So I'm all for that. I feel that.
Yeah, and that's kind of what the way that I want to design the leagues too is. So we're going to have 3 different kinds of leagues. There's going to be like a kids league. There's going to be a league that's kind of like for teens and high schoolers. And then we're going to do what is like a semi-pro slash pro academy type training for people that are older than high school. So if, in my case of what I'm doing right now, like I'm playing semi-pro football and it's now about to land me in arena football. So I want to be able to give other kids that more opportunity because it's like there's hundreds of thousands of kids that, are 18 years old. They're playing football and they take the helmet off after their last game, their senior year. And it's like, they put it in the locker and it's like, that's the last time they ever touch a football helmet. And for most of them, they could keep playing for the next 4 to 5 years. It would actually probably help them improve in schooling. It would help them focus with jobs. It would help them focus in other areas if they have, something that they're passionate about and they're constantly working towards. And to that same credit, it's like, well, let's say they keep playing for the next 4 years, they find out they're incredibly athletic by the time they're age 22. They finally put on some real size. They start hitting the gym, like they hit their peak level of athleticism and they're 22 years old and they, get an invite to the XFL tryouts and they're now an XFL player and, they make it there. Like that would be awesome. Like that. And at the end of the day is something that I'd like to have happen. Knowing what mental health has kind of happened recently and knowing how much sports kept me out of a lot of my darkness and, a lot of the, the bad stuff that naturally is going to happen in life because it's just going to happen. That for me, I think if I'm able to bring sports to more kids, both at an early age to get them started and get them away from, like, especially having been born and grew up in Chicago, like get them away from gangs, get them away from that way and aspect of life, because like the keeping you out of trouble. That for kids, like more kids need to be playing sports. More lessons can be taught to kids through sports than if you tell them to go read a book. Then as a teenager, like you can move from fundamentals, you can start to like actually work on the more skills, like, okay, like this is this specific for this sport. And you can start to hone in, like, so as a pitcher, you start to get better based off of, okay, now we're not just going to throw a fastball change up. We're going to start to implement a curve. We're going to implement a knuckleball. We're going to implement a circle change. We're starting to put in a slider, cutter, all these different things of like these little things as the sport goes on. So by the time you go from as a kid, you learn fundamentals, you can play whatever sports you want. You start to focus, you pick, 2 or 3, maybe 1 as, as you're a teen, go through high school, and then you can either continue to play in college, or if you decide just go to, you want to pick the college that you go to, and then you still want to play sports. We want to be there as that outside opportunity for people who are really, really competitive, and intramurals just doesn't meet that competitive match. Because I know that there was a lot of times where, playing co-ed or intramurals just it didn't satisfy my need of competition, because it's like it's not the same. It's just not the same.
Yeah, I get it. When there's people on the floor or the court, whatever respective sport we're talking about, if they're not competing the same way, it just doesn't hit the same.
Exactly.
That's really awesome, and it sounds like that's going to be a really good organization, especially for people like kind of like around our age too. I mean, people who are trying to keep like peak physical activity around. But there's one thing that you did mention a little while ago was semi-pro football and going to the arena league. So, do you want to talk a little more about that? That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, so I actually didn't even honestly really think it was something that was going to happen, because I wasn't playing football at the time, so I moved to Fargo November of 2020. I hadn't played football or I hadn't played contact football since I was in 8th grade. I still played flag. I still, when I was in college, I was in a flag tournament with, I was in like some regional 7-on-7 tournament. So it's like I get pretty competitive at 7-on-7, but it's a completely different game than actual tackle football. So for me, I moved out to Fargo and I had this dream the same night for 3 nights in a row. And I was like, why am I dreaming I'm playing football? Like, why am I dreaming in a place that I had never seen, with a helmet I'd never worn, colors I'd never worn. So it was just all these different, I was just like, okay. And so I literally pulled up Google and I was like, football near me. And there was a semi-pro team here in town. And I was like, cool. Semi-pro sounds fun. Like, let's see what this is about. Went and tried out, made the team, decided I was just going to stick to defense. So I actually play safety, and I'm our starting safety. And so going into our 3rd year, so I've played 2 seasons already. And so I'm a 3-time All-Star. I was also our punter and kicker. So I made All-Star both years at safety. And then this past season, I made it also as an All-Star punter. And then this year, as we kind of make a little bit of a shift, I'm actually moving back on the offensive side of the football. So I'm going to be playing both wide receiver and safety. But yeah, for me with semi-pro, it was something that kind of came out of the blue. So like these jerseys that are behind me, so the red and blue ones on the outside, that's from the All-American Bowl. And so the All-American Bowl is put on and was played in US Bank Stadium, so where the Vikings play. And the red jersey was from this year, it was December, or I guess 2022, December of 2022. And then the blue one was from December of 2021. And that year, I actually got defensive MVP of the game. And then the jersey that you see that's next to the red one, that's the number 30. That was from my All-Star season, my first year in the league. And so I made All-Star in the league. We played a game in Minneapolis where, I don't know, I had a handful of plays or whatever, but then we played a game in Vegas. And so I think it's like the Silver Star Bowl or something like that we played in. So I actually was defensive MVP in that game. And then like 2 weeks later, I played in the US, in the All-American Bowl, which was, where I got defensive MVP. So it was an awesome December 2021 for me. Like, those 2 games were a blast. Got to play in Vegas, got defensive MVP, and then turned around and did the same thing again in Minneapolis and in the Viking Stadium, was like all this other stuff. The 23 that I just moved from, that was from this past year. That's when I was, punter and safety. And so also played in Vegas, but nothing that eventful. And then the green one was a draft showcase game that I had played in. There was actually, it was just the one. And we had played a game. It was just it was a part of a camp that we were doing for some kids. And it was essentially a show game. I mean, it was still a competitive game. I think I had like a pick and like a tackle or something like that. I think I had 2 receptions on offense, or one reception on offense and a pick. So it's like, it wasn't anything crazy. I mean, we were out there having fun with some kids, and it was nothing that crazy. But the other 4 were, essentially real jerseys that had some real stuff to it. And then now, so us with the Fargo Invaders, we've started to make the transition from just being a semi-pro team that's here in town that plays in the north Midwest area. And, we were playing teams in Minneapolis. We played a team in Kansas City. We were supposed to play a team in Iowa. We were supposed to play a team in Nebraska. Some of those teams had fallen out and dropped out. So that's kind of the nature of semi-pro. It's not exactly the best run organization, which is the reason why I want to make my own leagues. And then now it's kind of gotten to the point where the league that we were in, which was called the NEFL, has now disbanded. So we are actually joining the SPFL, but we are en route to be joining as a professional indoor team. So we are playing 3 games against 3 different teams that are in the CIF, so the Champions Indoor Football League. We're playing a game in 3 weeks in Rapid City against the Rapid City Marshals. I think it's like February 19th or something like that. And then we're going to Billings, Montana and playing. And then we're playing a team in Gillette, Wyoming. So we have 3 pro games on the books for the next 2.5 months, 2.5, 3 months, something like that. And then we're just back to our regular scheduled semi-pro football. So I might not actually play in the actual semi-pro season, especially based off of the first 3 games, because if any of those first 3 go well, they're not just games for us. Like they're not like they're essential preseason game for the pro teams, but with them in their indoor, they are also scouting. So if I'm able to play well in any of those 3 games, there is a potential that other teams in the league and those teams, they can actually sign any of us, because there are ex players from the NFL that are playing in the CIF right now. There's a couple guys who had won championships. They're now decided to say, hey, and they're moving up and they're playing in the indoor league. So that is the next jump and place for me. We'll just see if I actually want to do it. Cause I know I've been kind of back and forth in terms of the football, if I want to play, if I don't want to play, because the indoor game is so different than playing outside. I just don't know if I'm fully involved in, I want to play arena football. Yes, it's pro, but I've been playing for free for so long. Like, I don't really care if someone's like, hey, here's a couple $100. Like, it's not like arena's paying you big money. Or even like USFL or XFL type money. I mean, it's small change. I mean, all the guys that play indoor football pretty much all have regular jobs. And if they don't have a regular job, then, they got a decent contract where they're, living pretty much paycheck to paycheck based off of what the team is paying them. So because I played for free for so long, like I don't play football for the money. Like I play football because I love the sport. I'm just going to decide if I like playing indoor ball, because I've never played the indoor arena thing. So we'll have to see how these next few months play out. But yeah, I'm sitting in this position with jerseys on my wall, not thinking I was ever going to be playing football again in my life. Especially when I first had moved here, in terms of like the whole MMA thing, like that was the initial thought in my head when I'd first moved to Fargo. I started lifting, started training, and then I essentially was like, oh, I kind of want to do MMA. And then that's what spurred, I had 3 straight dreams of me playing football. And I'm like, what is this about? And then now I've gotten to the point where I'm finally doing the MMA. And I think for me, I definitely had to, get back in shape and lose some weight before I played and, before I did the MMA scene. Cause when I first moved to Fargo and, kind of started playing football initially, I was nowhere close to the shape that I'm in now. And, the last few months of MMA training have definitely set me at a different, training level and conditioning level than 3 years ago. So it's interesting. It's interesting for sure. I'm not something that I scripted out when I moved here for sure.
That's just life, though. Life. Sometimes you just got to go with the flow, see what life has to offer, and yeah. Oh man, it's a dope story. Your whole story in general is just dope. I'm a real fan of just the world of sports, and seeing somebody who was fully ingrained in the world of sports. It's just dope to chop it up with you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and like you said, I mean, it's life. It's like whatever gets thrown at me. I mean, any person's ever said to me, "Hey, do you want to go play this?" And I'm like, "Yep." I mean, I know for me with my soccer, like I didn't play soccer for that long, but like I played in middle school, and the person who was on the right and or left of me, depending on who I was in for at that time, but like I played midfield, and our center midfielder was Weston McKinney. So it's like I grew up playing with Weston McKinney, who's now a captain for the U.S. men's soccer team. So it's like, I feel it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like I got a chance to share the field with, a person who at this point is one of the best soccer players in America, if not one of, Christian Pulisic is there. And, you can make an argument for a couple other guys, but it's like, I played with Weston. So I'm going to say that Weston's the best. And then, the same goes for, for football. Like Nick Bolton for the Chiefs, who had the most
Mm-hmm.
tackles in the season. He was a grade behind me. And, he went to the same middle school I did. He went to the same high school I did. Like, I know Nick. I know a handful of other athletes that I either played against or shared the field with as a teammate. And, it's fun having that aspect and, seeing guys make it to the highest level. And, I might not be playing that sport anymore, or, maybe I was never fully involved in that sport, but I feel like the sports world treats each other really, really well. And that's where the fun and joy out of it comes. And I just love it so much. And, you guys allow me to come on and, have a sports conversation. Anyone is like, hey, you want to talk sports? I'm like, let's do it. Let's go. Like, I'm in. I'm in.
Yeah, we've really enjoyed having you on too. But where can everyone find you on social media and your organization too?
So my personal stuff, I'm on Instagram and TikTok as at mighty_Q21. It's the same for Twitter, but I don't use Twitter. And then I'm trying to think of the Born to Win stuff. I think if you were to just type in Born to the number 2 win, I think might pull up the best stuff. But I know Born to Win Media on YouTube and Born to Win Media, I think on Instagram and TikTok is the same. I want to say it's Born to Win Media, but that actually might, well, I know for sure on YouTube it's Born to Win Media. I just don't know if Instagram is Born to Win Media, but I know TikTok is also Born to Win Media. Not much stuff posted on Instagram and TikTok yet. All the stuff's kind of on Instagram at this point, but yeah, my own stuff is mighty_Q21.
Yeah, make sure y'all go ahead and check him out. Quinn Redmond, dope conversation, dope person, to be honest with you. It was great to meet you and having you on. And hopefully in the future we can chop it up a little more.
Hey, I would love that. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. Like you said, anytime, if you guys ever want to have this conversation, want to talk some more sports, you know where to find me. Let's do it again.
Yes, sir. But once again, make sure to check out Quinn at any of his social medias. You got mighty_Q21 and check out Born to Win as well. That does it for another episode of All Takes No Whiffs. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. Also turn on notifications to know when we post. And if you guys want, you could find our social medias as well at ATNW Podcast, all on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. But until then, peace out, y'all.
Peace.